Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Always a pleasure to be here.
So have you ever heard someone toss around the term Pharisee? Like it's, I don't know, some kind of ultimate insult.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's kind of become this catch-all for anyone who's a little too judgmental or, holier than thou.
Exactly. And that's exactly what we're diving into today, this whole idea of modern-day Pharisees. We're taking a look at this analysis that really breaks down judgment, accusation, and that whole self-righteousness thing that we humans are so prone to.
You hit the nail on the head. The text we're looking at doesn't use Pharisee lightly. It's not just a casual dig. It defines what it calls this Pharisaical spirit in a very specific way.
Okay, so what are we talking about here?
We're talking self-righteousness, hypocrisy, judgment.
Hmm.
It's a pretty potent cocktail.
Whoa, yeah. I mean, I think we can all picture that stereotypical Pharisee, right? Super concerned with outward appearances, all about the rules.
Right. But the text pushes us to go deeper than that stereotype.
So what's the deeper implication then? How does this Pharisaical spirit actually play out in the real world?
Well, it helps to think about the historical Pharisees for a second.
Yeah.
These were people who, in many ways, were driven by this deep desire for control.
Control over what?
Control over everything. Themselves, other people, you name it. They saw themselves as the guardians of religious purity.
Guardians of religious purity.
Yeah. Which too often meant trying to dictate how other people should live their lives, how they should interpret the law, all that.
Oh, so it's like a subtle form of power then.
Exactly. It's about power, and it's about this sense of superiority.
That makes a lot of sense, especially when you consider how this text compares modern-day Pharisees to, wait for it, Satan.
That's right. It calls Satan the accuser of the brethren.
Whoa. That's a pretty intense comparison, wouldn't you say?
It's about as intense as it gets, and honestly, it's kind of unsettling.
Yeah. So what do you think the text is getting at with that?
It's highlighting just how destructive accusation can be.
Okay, I can see that.
Think about it. When we accuse someone, we're not really interested in understanding them, are we? We don't want to reconcile. We just want to tear them down.
You're right. It's like we want to expose their flaws so that we can feel better about ourselves.
Exactly. It's like we're trying to assert our own moral superiority, but at the expense of someone else.
Wow. I mean, talk about playing right into Satan's hands. But it really makes you wonder, why? Why do people act this way? What's the motivation behind all this judgment and accusation?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Luckily, the text we're looking at today dives into some of the psychological angles, and it's fascinating stuff.
Oh, lay it on me.
Well, for starters, there's this very human need to feel superior.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
It's like judging others somehow elevates your own status.
So like, I'm better than you because I don't do that.
Bingo. And then there's the whole avoidance factor.
Avoidance.
It's often just easier to focus on someone else's shortcomings than it is to confront our own.
Oh, 100%. It's
Yeah.
so much easier to point the finger right.
Right. And it's so much easier to judge.
Like to be self-righteous.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
classic projection, right? We're projecting our own stuff onto other people so we don't have to deal with it ourselves.
It's kind of like that whole mote and beam analogy.
Yes.
You know, obsessing over the tiny speck in someone else's eye while totally ignoring the massive log in your own.
It's almost painful, isn't it? The irony is just, like, palpable.
It really is. And the text really calls out that hypocrisy, too. Is like those so-called Pharisees are so caught up in judging everyone else that they become totally blind to their own faults.
It's like they're looking in a funhouse mirror, distorted and warped.
Yeah. So the text also talks about how these modern-day Pharisees often dig up the past, using old mistakes or perceived slights as weapons.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good point. The past is fair game, apparently.
Like, what's that all about? What do you think that tells us about their intentions?
To me, it screens control and manipulation. It's not about justice.
Okay, I can see that.
I mean, think about it. Dragging someone's past into the present, whether it's accurate or completely twisted out of context, it's a way to keep them off balance.
It's like they're trying to keep people on edge all the time.
Exactly. It's a way to maintain a sense of power, but it's cruel.
It's just mean.
It is. And it creates this toxic atmosphere of fear and resentment.
Ugh, that sounds awful. It seems like a lot of this Pharisaical behavior stems from insecurity, wouldn't you say?
I think you're spot on. This constant need to point fingers to find fault in others, it's often masking a deep-seated fear of being found inadequate.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that.
It's like by projecting their insecurities onto other people, they're creating this distraction
Distraction from what?
from their own perceived flaws.
Ah, I see.
It's a defense mechanism, but it's one that ultimately backfires.
How so?
It leads to isolation and spiritual stagnation. It cuts you off from actually growing as a person.
So if we're supposed to avoid this whole Pharisaical spirit thing, what's the alternative?
What are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to navigate all the complexities of life, human interaction, without falling into these traps?
It's a good question, right? It feels kind of unavoidable sometimes.
It does, but the text gives us a way forward. The key, it says, lies in cultivating humility and grace.
Humility and grace, okay.
It's about recognizing that we're all flawed, we're all on our own journey, and none of us have all the answers.
Right, it's like giving people the benefit of the doubt.
Exactly. Instead of jumping to conclusions, we need to practice empathy.
Okay, empathy.
Yeah, to try and actually understand where other people are coming from, what their struggles are, their perspectives. It's about offering the same forgiveness and compassion that we hope to receive.
That's powerful. I mean, it really makes you think, especially in today's world. It's just so easy to get caught up in that whole outrage cycle.
Right.
It's easy to judge and condemn without really trying to understand. This whole deep dive has been a powerful reminder that true spiritual growth...
It's internal, isn't it?
It is. It requires us to look inward, to acknowledge our own shortcomings and to actively choose compassion over judgment.
Could not have said it better myself, and I think that's the most important takeaway from all of this.
Oh yeah, what is it?
The more we focus on cultivating our own humility and grace,
Better.
yes, the less power these destructive tendencies will have over us.
That makes sense.
And in turn, we can start to create a more loving and compassionate world around us. It starts with each of us.
I think that's a perfect place to leave our listeners with something to ponder. Where might we be exhibiting those Pharisaical tendencies in our own lives?
Ooh, good one.
It's a tough question.
It is.
It's not always easy to admit.
No, but it's worth it.
But that self-awareness is the first step, right?
Absolutely.
It's the first step towards real growth and meaningful connection with others.
That's what it's all about.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See you then.